Today, my guest is Christy Hamilton. She is the partner and chief operating officer of Carey Co. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and be able to talk about this wonderful work that we have.
Christy, tell me a little bit about your background.
Of course. I came to Carey Co. in probably a non-traditional way. I come from the nonprofit space. I spent my career in nonprofit theater on top of it, which is probably the most opposite that you can get from an accounting firm. It was a lot of years of learning how to be resourceful, how to understand a lot of different priorities in a space that probably isn't typical, right? A theater at best is subjective. It is not quantified or metrics driven. This is all about art and how people feel. And so being in that space and also being tasked with general management and operations there, you're kind of the lone wolf in a space of like a bunch of artists. And I am an artist. I have been an artist. So understanding both left and right brain has definitely been to my advantage throughout life. But I think early on in my career, when you are sitting there talking about like the roles of technology and operations and how to streamline and how to optimize, all of these words that I think the for-profit sector uses so regularly, was like talking in gibberish to a bunch of theater artists that were like, no, this is about creating art and it should be about metrics and it shouldn't be about the bottom line. So I think it definitely taught me to be creative and resourceful, which I think is really helpful when you come to a consulting firm that helps nonprofits scale, stabilize, optimize, I guess is another word, but really be able to make it through the market and help them make better decisions, or at least decisions that in a workplace like a nonprofit where you are tasked to make the world a better place or solve incredible problems that humanity experiences, it can be really difficult then to be like, well, what kind of general ledger should I pick? What kind of technology should I have? It just seems like a very basic question when you're really facing some larger problems.
So tell us a little bit about Carey Co. and what their mission is, what their
Yeah, of
clients
course.
look like.
Yeah. So Carey Co. is in our 12th year. We came up as an accounting firm, but we only work with nonprofits, so we specialize in this sector. We now offer all of our back office services, our accounting, operations, HR, fundraising, and technology. Technology being more like your general ledger packages and how your general ledger should talk to your AP system. So it's definitely a piece that we see our clients always struggling with and understanding the importance of it, but maybe not having the funding, maybe not having the people resources to be able to not only decide on a project, but then implement it and then execute it and then have the company or the organization fully adopt it. So a lot of the technology pieces we're coming in and helping them with are one-offs. They are like the smallest, most narrow part of the project because that's the part that the organization can tolerate at that time. But for the most part, where we help at the CFO, controller, bookkeeper, senior accountant levels, the chief operating officer, the chief HR officer. We also launched March 1st for our fundraising services. So we are now doing major campaigns, strategy and assessment, and all of those things that kind of go into how do you build your nonprofit, how do you stabilize it, how do you fund it, how do you grow it, do all of those things.
So you're actually now fundraising on behalf of a nonprofit?
No, it's definitely not like a pass-through service. It's not unlike our CFO services where we'll go in and be their chief development officer, or we sit down and we say, okay, what is the vision and like what is your fundraising strategy that goes with that? So if you're trying to buy a building, if you're trying to grow to different locations, you need a fundraising strategy that's going to also take into account what kind of donor appetite there is, both individual, major foundations, governments. And especially right now with kind of the volatility that we're seeing, a lot of our nonprofits are really struggling to diversify and diversify very quickly.
These are challenging times, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
So, and what's kind of the size of if there is an average size of client, or do you kind of span from very small to very large?
I think our smallest client is $30,000, and she's fantastic, and I think it's going to change the course of the world. But right now, she's only 30 grand. Our largest client is 380 million, which is a very traditional organization here in the city, very brick and mortar, also a very necessary service that. So our clients really span based on Funding, mission type, what their organization structure is, but what the mission is too. We have clients that are both US based and international. We have clients all across the country. We do coast to coast. We have a New York firm and an LA firm that helps us, really reach the clients where they are.
And so let's talk a little bit about how your firm is using technology to support your clients.
Sure. I think what we're learning right now is that technology is evolving so fast, right? And everybody knows that. And I think for us, especially in our accounting spaces, that means that the general ledger packages that used to be 50, 60, 70 and upwards thousands of dollars to implement and took a really long time, but you chose that once every 5 to 7 years. You're now having to choose that, once every year or two, as far as like, what is the software? How is it keeping up to date? How is it evolving and how is it adapting? So our clients are faced with larger technology questions that are happening faster than they have been before. And not only do they have to decide on that technology, for nonprofits, reporting is an incredibly instrumental and necessary function for them. So they obviously have their year-end tax audits and things that we have to help with, but also, when they're going to apply for government grants or foundational grants, they have to have proper ratios, which means their reporting back to their accounting has to all be really well mapped out. So making changes in that space can be really difficult. And so the organizations put it off. And so you put it off 1 year, then you put it off 5, then it's 10 years. And then all of a sudden the software that was brand new in 2003 is actually no longer supported. And now you're looking at sundowning, you're looking at, the way that the market is functioning now is not how it functioned back then. And so then they're having problems with recruitment and retention of staff. So it really, that technology question really drills down to so many other fundamental questions about how the organization is running, that it can be not only an Achilles heel, but it can be an insurmountable mountain to most of our clients.
And so you provide the consulting services to help them make sure they're on the right software for whatever is correct for their size and their function. Do you help implement those packages?
Sure, but right now we're still a smaller firm. We only have about 150 people in both firms right now, and our technology space is probably our smallest and newest because we're so focused on the people part of some of those services, especially when you lose your CFO or your COO, and then that becomes the biggest problem, and we see that happen quite a bit over the last couple of years as far as turnover. So I think our technology piece is the scrappy but small but mighty kind of spot, but it integrates so many different service lines. So what ends up happening is that our CFOs or our controllers, when they're faced with software choices, they come back in-house and they talk to our team and they say, okay, what are we seeing in the market? This is the kind of funding that I have. These are the kind of reports that I need. What is the proper GL or what is the proper tech stack that I should have in order to get these reports or to get the organization the financials that they need? And then there's ideal pie in the sky choice of you really should have these things. And then you have to go, okay, but the tolerance for change is low. The appetite for making some of these full scale changes is high, but the resources are non-existent. So it is a constant conversation about what is the compromise, what is the push-pull. And I think in order to be able to do that across the nonprofit sector, you have to be expert in all of the different areas, but then also really creative in how you adopt the solutions or help the client adopt the solutions. So I think, as somebody explained it to me this way at some point, it's it's a Sherpa kind of service of okay, how do I go to market? How do I not get lost in the overwhelming noise of AI and cybersecurity and GL updates, and what is the tech stack for all of these things, that you do need a trusted resource to say, okay, please just help me streamline some of these choices.
Mm-hmm. It's a really valuable service that you're providing. And how are you using technology within your own firm, within Carey Co,
Sure.
to expand the business, to manage the business that you have on behalf of all the clients?
Of course. I think the biggest introduction that we've done recently is our time tracking and our forecasting. That system has been very helpful as far as looking at what our capacity is at each firm but in each position and what that forecast will look like in a couple months from now. I think it's a difficult place, especially right now, because it could really change tomorrow. And then you're like, oh, I'm either going to have so much capacity or I'm going to have none based on like what the decisions are made. But I think that's been one of our largest pieces in also having the East Coast and the West Coast firm really fully integrate and understand like what the utilization is across the firm, not just in like a specific location at a specific level. I think that's been helpful. I know that we've utilized more AI in our CRM, which seems to be the hot topic these days. So that's definitely helped with some of our sales process, or at least our nurturing processes, and they seem to be very effective. And it also is a little mind-boggling, right? That these things can sound like someone or sound like people, but it helps us reach more organizations that are in crisis or that are in overwhelming situations. It helps us get to the person faster to say, okay, now let's have a conversation about what's actually going on and how we can help you.
So it sounds like one of the important tasks for your company is really brand awareness, how to know that I need to go to Carey Co when I'm a nonprofit and I need these kinds of support of these services.
Yeah, for sure.
Are you doing that sort of marketing and investment in the brand so that
Yeah.
people, that you're a name that comes to mind?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think, well, would you always like a bigger market share? Yes. I think branding and building this firm as a 12-year-old firm is something that you're no longer the small engine that could, or the guy that you're like, I know a guy somewhere, and you're not one of the bigger players that have unlimited resources in marketing and people. So we're still at that boutique size, which I think serves our clients really well on the nonprofit space, because you're still going to talk to somebody, that person, myself, or who doesn't go away. So you're still reaching a smaller pool, so the connection is better. But I think what we also try and do is align ourselves with other companies that are big in the nonprofit space, that are trusted resources, because for our nonprofit sector, it's really about knowing them, and it's really about access. So they don't really want to talk to you unless you know what the nonprofit space is like, because if you're going to be in the trenches, then you better have been in the trenches. So I think aligning ourselves with other firms that also add expertise, add guidance in a lot of different ways, from strategy assessment, capacity evaluation. I would also say like crisis communications is a huge one these days that was not one several years ago. But I think firms that are agile, that help the clients make decisions in these volatile times, are the ones that we're trying to align the most with, because we can also help in stabilizing and building and guiding the decision making.
And do you have a partner network if there are certain things that you don't have the expertise, or it makes sense because it's not a full-time need? Do you leverage partner capabilities to provide those sorts of services to the clients?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what's really great about this vertical is that it is a small and tight sandbox. So if you know nonprofits, then you are known in the nonprofit space. And so it is, I would say, a smaller pool, but a very tight-knit circle of, we were talking about this the other day about referral agreements and whether or not there should be revenue sharing attached to them. And so many firms that are in this nonprofit space are actually more cognizant of trust, cognizant of not overburdening the client or overwhelming them, that it's actually not about revenue. Can you just promise me that when I introduce you to this client, they'll be better off than when they were before they met you? And I think that's something very beautiful and idealistic, but it's actually something that the service firms in this sector really adhere to.
It is a very different culture than in the profit world.
Yeah.
And it's interesting the way you described your background coming up through theater, that it's all about how you feel and taking care of either the audience or the client in this case. It's not about the money,
No.
and it's not about being as profitable as you can be. But in order to survive, you have to have that business focus. And so it is a very right, left brain kind of environment that you have to survive in. So,
and I think it's good work if you can get it, right? Who doesn't want to wake up every day and go, I am going to try and help solve world hunger. I'm going to help and try and solve homelessness. All of these like really beautiful ideals that you're supposed to solve with little to no resources, I think is a way to have a people focused or a mission focused, but also have to remember that a lot of people in this space would like nonprofits to run more like a business, right? Remember that your nonprofit is still a business. And I think that is somewhat of a true adage, and on the other side of it is that it's not. It's really like at the end of the day, it's a very different model because it has a different end game. It's not about making sure that the organization can live on in perpetuity like I think some of the for-profits do. These organizations are really meant to solve something. So they should solve homelessness. Would be great. I mean, not to say that this isn't a large list, but that these organizations should really be able to make a difference in that mission. So the metrics should be different.
What keeps you up at night about your job, about the firm?
Sure. Well, it's, I think when you go into our clients, you want to say, okay, I understand where you are, and you definitely have to be more focused on the mission. So let me help you with the back office, because that's my part in the role of making the world a better place. And I think what keeps me up is that we are also a small business, right? So you want to make sure that in many of our cases, the cash flow can be slower. It can be harder to make sure that like the invoices are paid, but it also has to be mindful, right? That this isn't the same kind of business model. So I think making sure that our small business is growing, is also scaling, but is also healthy and efficient. And we also leave the clients better because we are operating on an efficient and optimized way, I think is probably the old adage is like, you can always improve something, I think is probably what keeps me up at night. And I think it's a great aim.
And I don't know if we said this before, but your title is Partner and Chief Operating Officer.
Yep.
So you have that responsibility to ensure operations are smooth, that you're efficient and optimized. Those are big things to do.
Tell me about it. I think especially given how I have like come up in the professional world, to tell you that I have been called an untraditional COO once would be I hear it on a very daily basis. And I think at some point you do have to take that as a badge of honor because, a service firm that is helping nonprofits optimize and organize and stabilize all of the verbs that you could ever come up with also requires somebody that is maybe a little more untraditional, that can understand and synthesize a lot of priorities in very different spaces. And I think you have to be, if you're going to be a systems person or a COO, an operations person, you have to be a person to it. Still, at the end of the day, people on the other side of it, AI or not, there are still people at the other side of those missions that are really trying to help change the world. And so I think remembering that is the biggest part of my job some days too.
I agree with that so much. We're in the technology space, but I always say, the technology is actually the easy part. It's the people side.
Yeah, for
We
sure.
cannot lose sight of the fact that we're doing this to make people more successful, to make their jobs better, to make their lives better, and to accomplish whatever the goal of their company is.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, Christy, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. And I wish you all the best of luck with Carey Co. and keep doing the wonderful work that you're doing in the world.
Thanks, Jenny. It was a pleasure. I'm really glad that we got a chance to talk.